Welcome.
Hi, Mia. Thank you so much for inviting me. And hi, everyone. I'm seeing a lot of people from around the world. So good morning, good afternoon, and evening to everyone.
Amazing. We're so excited to have you. So while we get started, I'd like to start off with a quick introduction. Ezzy, as as folks know, we have had a lot of challenges in the AI ethics space. And if you recall back when researchers like Dr. Joy Bulimini and others found that commercial facial recognition systems do not recognize dark-skinned women. Abiba Birhane and her colleagues found faces of images of African people, women in popular data sets labeled with slurs. We have had many researchers and scholars who are at the forefront of the work that's being done, and these biases are embedded in the system. So for Black history in the AI systems, and those are leading to unfair outcomes of these algorithmic systems, causing more harms. So for Black History Month, we have invited digital rights specialist Emsie Erastus to discuss how historically marginalized communities are more likely to be left out of the responsible AI discourse, how this exclusion shows up in algorithmic system outcomes, and she will be sharing how nation states can ethically adopt and deploy these systems. For those of you who do not know MC, she is a digital rights specialist at Internews Technology Rights and Policy Research. She was recognized on the 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics list for 2024. She collaborates with governments, private sector, civil society organizations to advance the responsible use of emerging technology. She also trains and works with various stakeholders to understand the complexity of technology. She was responsible for leading a multi-stakeholder initiative in Zambia, which resulted in the Zambian government incorporating ethics and R&D into its AI national strategy. So we're excited, super excited to have her. We will post a link to her LinkedIn. So please follow her work and support her work because we need your expertise more than ever and leadership more than ever now. We also featured MC in our AI ethics profiles and careers journeys report. We published it on the Women in AI Ethics website. So you can read also about a career journey if you're curious, how can you get started in your AI ethics journey? So without further ado, MC, my first question for you is, today's conversation is about algorithmic apartheid. Can you help us understand conceptually, what is apartheid?
I'm currently based in Windhoek, Namibia. And my country has gone through this system called apartheid. Specifically, my parents, my mom has faced apartheid. What apartheid is, it's very similar to the Jim Crow system. Apartheid mainly means to separate or separate one from another. And that is what the apartheid did. It's a system that was implemented in Namibia and then Southwest Africa. So currently in Namibia, where I am born and are currently based. And what happened is that the Afrikaans government of that time came up with a system, with a very evil system. I think that's the only way that you can give it. And that was to separate whites and blacks, but also to separate what they would then deem as white, blacks, and coloreds. So the separation was all like in Namibia, for example, there was an old location where people were moved, which is good land, fertile land, and people were removed from that land and given land that was not fertile. And in this land, in Windhoek currently, for example, they created what you call Bantu stands, or where the Bantu people or the Black people would then live. So this separation came in terms of land, in terms of economy. So Black people, for example, there was a Bantu education system where Black people were only allowed to study until a certain grade. And Apartheid also had a very similar brown color testing. So the lighter you were, the more likely you were considered to be colored. So you got more of a better opportunity, better jobs, not as equal as to that of a white man. Apartheid had what we call passes, and the passes gave you a category, they numbered you. So if you're white Africans, male, you were number 1. And my community, our Wambo people, we were considered to be below. So we were the last, number 11. We were so my parents, for example, could not get access to good education. They would only go until what we call standard 10 at that time. So apartheid really it was a very social, but also very economic, but also a very degrading system that took place in South Africa and Namibia between the late 1940s to 1990 in Namibia.
That is absolutely horrific.
Yeah.
I am so sorry. Thank you so much for sharing that. This is the lived experiences and perspectives that are so important for people to hear. This is not something that we typically read about in history books, like maybe it's just surface level. So thank you so much. I can't even imagine how traumatizing that is would be. Can you help us understand, like conceptually, people do think when they think of apartheid, okay, South Africa and so on. It's like, what is that? Some key traits that people should look out for when apartheid shows up in different forms in different parts of the world? Like, what are some things that you'd say, yes, these are the traits, and because of these traits, this looks like a duck, walks like a duck, right? It looks like apartheid, sounds like apartheid. This is apartheid. How would people know in real life, like what that looks like in other parts of the world?
Yeah. So apartheid is anything that is added. So if you are different, in India, you might call it the caste system. Like I said, in the US, you would call it the Jim Crow system. And we know that these systems, yes, legally they were allowed, for example, between the 1940s to the 1990s in Namibia and South Africa. However, even though the law took it away, these systems were still active. We do know that in the US, slavery, for example, has ended, but the Jim Crow system, for example, is still active. And the traits are very obvious to tell. Any time that something that is different from you, and in today's world, it's coming up in terms of color, in terms of gender, in terms of religion, in terms of just personal beliefs, or just in terms of class even. So anything that basically is different, that puts you in a position of privilege, and other people are marginalized because of your privilege or your sense of living a comfortable life. So anytime that shows up, then we know that forms of apartheid or forms of extreme, I can't even say it's discrimination because it's to the extreme, to the point that a whole community will support and form beliefs to say that, yes, these people are different from us. These people are not like us. They are less intelligent. What apartheid, for example, did was to say that a Black person's brain is equal to the brain of a chicken. That means that they cannot think or fathom or even grasp any concept or even study to be science subjects, for example, because they are only capable of cleaning a house or cooking under supervision. So basically anything that other a person in a very extreme and inhumane manner, we can categorize that as a form of apartheid.
Thank you so much for sharing that, because that's absolutely disturbing. It's dehumanizing of entire groups of people, treating them lesser than, creating a systemic barrier for them, the systemic barriers for them to even, by just labeling them, right? Dehumanizing and saying that these are just, when you label them as being inferior, then you put it right there. You're putting them in this category and not giving them any way of getting out of that category and preserving all of those resources and taking with the resources access to opportunities. Truly horrific. So you've said that these apartheid shows up like this discrimination, which is such a deeper form of discrimination. I feel like even the word discrimination doesn't do it full justice, like you said. But this shows up in algorithmic systems. Can you help us understand how does apartheid, which is a real world concept, this is happening all over the world, it shows up as it's called by different names, but it still exists in real world, and that shows up in these algorithmic systems. Can you help us understand that?
Okay. I think one thing I always like to do with technology, because we can get very excited about technology, and we can try to sound too smart for our own good when it comes to technology, but it's always good to really go back to how we experience technology. My first experience, I worked for a national broadcaster here in Namibia, and we have what we call a Vahimba woman. I don't know if you're able to pull up maybe any source of pictures of a Vahimba woman. So naturally, they actually they do not wear anything. So they are, especially for the women, the breasts will be bare. And I think around the early 2015s, Facebook's content moderation was coming under a lot of scrutiny, and they started to use their AI then to moderate content. So being from Namibia, we have over Himba women, but around the world, they are popular for tourists because of the way, the indigenous way of that they look. And so they would normally take pictures for entertainment purposes. But then working for a public broadcaster, we would do stories that deal with maternal health, for example. However, those stories would get removed because they violate Facebook's content moderation policy, which is then nudity. But then for a bigger channel, for example, at that time it was channel 4E in the UK, they did a reality show on my tribe next door. And that video was up on Facebook, and Facebook did not remove it. So I think it got me asking really, what is it? Because we try to reach out to Facebook, but you can feel that you're talking to a machine, that there's no one who's really responding to you. And being from Namibia, a country that is not even barely mentioned history, a lot of people do not know about Namibia. So for Facebook or for Meta to know about Ovahimba people, the chances are very slim. So, and already it tells you the people that were designing or coming up with this, they had all sorts of data in their possession. However, their algorithm, there was no way to translate it because their place lacked somebody with the knowledge of these communities. And that's the very basis of algorithmic biases, right? The fact that these machines, no matter how much data you have, if I have a lot of data and I'm creating something, I will create it to the best of my knowledge. And if I don't know anything about Namibia, for example, I would not put up anything to help or to protect Namibians because it has not even grasped my mind. So there's those biases that already embedded within society. So already by make, these technologies that are deployed on us, they are biased in a sense that they do not understand the realities that we live in. And then there are the biases and seen biases where, for example, a question that some people might ask, all white people racist? It's a debate that people can. But the question would be then, do you benefit from racism, for example? And already with having a room full of one specific group of people, it being white male, as we have seen in Silicon Valley, the technology or what their algorithms bring out is confined to their knowledge, it's confined to the people that they hire, and those biases, and then they want to deploy that technology on a global community. So that specific limited knowledge is then what causes certain biases that come out, and their algorithms to be biased because there is no one to overcheck, no one to do anything. And if I only saw white people, chances are the camera that I create can only pick up white skin. So just just to
That's such a great point, and I'm so glad that you joined us to have this conversation because you're absolutely right. Silicon Valley is dominated by white men, and not just white men, privileged white men, and their worldview is extremely limited. They claim to be experts, but their gaze is always that of the Western gaze. It's more voyeurism, looking at indigenous cultures as something which is more touristy and tourism for photographs, and but not really appreciating the cultures, which is why it shows up in these biases. Like you said, the photos are flagged even though they're of an indigenous culture, because they don't understand culture. They don't understand the culture of other countries. Rather than expanding that view, they're doubling down on just having a very Western-centric, white male-centric view, replicating and amplifying that view and imposing it on the rest of the world. So I appreciate you joining us and sharing that. There's also a different kind of bias, and I was reading some of your work, and you mentioned accent bias as well, right? Because I'll be honest, I don't use any of these voice recognition systems like Alexa, Siri, any of that, because they never recognize my accent. And it's just so frustrating, and I just don't bother with them anymore. So in your work, you have talked about it. Can you talk a little bit about more like how these systems don't even work for us in other ways, such as from an accent discrimination?
so I don't know if you can pick up my accent, but I know that we all have some sort of accent. But I remember when I was in my teens, and iPhones were like, everyone was getting an iPhone, and Siri was really like the in thing. And you had to speak in a specific manner. You have to have that British or that American accent in order for Siri to understand where you are going. Or if you're saying, Siri, where is my phone, for example, you had to really, or Siri, turn on the touch. You had to really say it in a specific way. I think for me, this topic of speech biases or recognition biases really came to light when I was working in Zambia. And we specifically were dealing with a community in Livingston where we had a visually impaired man. And he says that for him, having some AI tools helps him to recognize some of his privacy matters. So for example, in the past, when he gets a text message, he would call somebody to come and read his text messages, which some of them could be very personal text messages. And that's where the technology for good comes in. But then with speech, he could then communicate with his device, and he could read his messages for them. However, it pronouncing any names or even hearing him say certain things, he had to train his tongue how to pronounce certain words, which when I did research at that time, I think OAS had about 24, if I'm not mistaken, different English accents. And the only African accent they had at that time was South African accent, which was of Afrikaans speaking English. So even the African accent did not exist. We didn't have pidgin accent. Accent, for example, from the east of Africa is very different from west of Africa, from middle Africa, which is the Francophone type of countries. It's very different from Southern Africa, for example. So already deploying just one, and iPhone has a lot of consumers on the African continent. So it's not a product that is purchased by people. However, their products do not recognize a lot of African accents, let alone even languages. Let's just first talk about just the language that we are communicating and just picking up words that I'm saying. It's very hard for them to do that. And that's not only with Apple, for example, it's with Hey Google, with Alexa, with a lot of now with a lot of chatbots that are coming up. I saw the other day that OpenAI can now speak Afrikaans very fluently, whereas it still struggles to pick up a lot of other African languages. So
that was so insightful. And I love what you said about we all have an accent. It's just the American accent of the Silicon Valley who is building this system. Accent becomes the predominant accent that we all have to then learn it. We all are forced to do the labor of learning or training these systems based on that. So that is essentially the at the core of this issue. So thank you so much for sharing that. And also, I don't know how many Americans know this, but Africa is a continent. There is not just one country. Right? So that's also something that shows the limitations also of the Western culture and Western educational system, just this knowledge of the rest of the world is very limited. So I love that. So let's talk about Africa and your experience there, and how is AI being deployed at regional and national level? What is the perspective as a continent? And do you see what are the variations, if you will? Like we have limited time, but I'd love to get your takeaways from your work that you're doing, top insights. How are they thinking about AI? How are they deploying AI? Are they creating their own models, or are they just using was built in Silicon Valley? Like, where are they at?
okay. So, so to get this question, I would like to start off by speaking to my knowledge, which is in Southern Africa, and not speak for the whole entire continent. So just a little bit of what I have focused on in Southern Africa. I know that just like most of the world, we are consumers of big tech. And that's why we call it big tech. So you either have Google, Microsoft, IBM, Apple, Meta, OpenAI, and all the other emerging. So those companies have dominated from the very beginning. And anyone that, for example, when it comes to internet, there's a researcher that I work with, her name is Esther Mwema, and she's looking at how decolonizing undersea cables in Africa. So she looks at how all the undersea cables are owned by either Microsoft, Google, and so it's very, I can say in Africa, we are consumers, but I think that is a trend that is around the world, where we are more of consumers of this technology. What Africans are trying to do now is to regulate. So a lot of national strategies are also coming up. The African Union, which is the body of the Africa, so think of it as EU or the European Union, but really not in that way. The African Union came up what they call the African Intercontinental AI Strategy. And in that strategy, they come up with certain strategies that they recommend African countries taking. I know that a few countries in Africa have already come up with their national strategies. Mauritius, for example, is a very good example. They have been doing the work way before even some European countries have been doing it. Morocco has also been doing some work. And then South Africa as well, who are trying to do under participatory governance. In Zambia, we started, because that's where I was based, working with the Zambian government to come up with the national AI strategy. And our advocacy in Zambia was really at the beginning, where the government was working alone with some private stakeholders or some stakeholders from outside, we try to advocate for as many Zambian CEOs or civil society organizations to be involved in the process of drafting the strategy. And that was our main advocacy for the past 2 years, to really get a room, to get the government's trust, for them to trust that we have the expertise, that Zambians have the expertise in order for them to get involved. And it was towards the end where the Zambian government actually then said that, okay, can you please look at this document for us and see what you can do. And through that, I think the Zambian government really opened up themselves to really be different from a lot of countries who are coming up with national AI strategies, because then they welcomed civil society organizations. So as Internews, we're a consortium that we called Open Spaces, and we worked with different civil societies that are Zambian based. So organizations like Bloggers of Zambia, MISA Institute of Zambia, PENOS, and Chapter One Foundation. So it was really a lot of advocacies where we got media involved, and that's then pressing for the freedom of expression and getting lawyers involved as well to make sure that the specific laws are actually, so Chapter One Foundation. So to make sure that a lot of Zambian organizations are involved. It was also during the time when we got the Access to Information Act passed, which allowed then for us to get a chance to see what the government was doing more. So really a lot of advocacy is what's happening on the African government, because, and I think it could be a blessing in disguise that Africa is right now more of setting up laws instead of just innovating and building, because then we are getting a base to try and protect people, which is the basis of ethics, is to protect the human being, to protect our planet before we can build. But of course, because it's a double-edged sword, we are faced with big tech, because then we are consuming a lot of big tech. And I don't know how many people saw something that I'm very proud of the South African government for doing, that they have compelled Meta and the rest, Google, to pay media houses in South Africa for basically what is happening. So that's a very interesting case that I think we should all, as people involved in ethics, should rally behind the South African government and to make sure that big tech pays media houses, because globally freedom of expression is currently under attack. So yeah, so Africa is more on the policy. There is innovations taking place, but it's obviously not at the pace of big tech.
Super excited to hear that. Thank you so much for sharing. I definitely have to look closely at like what's because this is the time, and I feel like South Africa is really stepping up and making sure that they're taking the lead. I just have to share the MC. You're so amazing. You're amazing and so knowledgeable. Thanks for being here. Exactly how I feel. This is so enlightening, and um, I have two questions for you, because it's just amazing how much progress is being made. And I do look at innovation is not just about building. Innovation is about creating better futures, and that's where you're leading. And I feel like the definition of innovation has been co-opted by Silicon Valley to just mean, just keep building more and more reckless products, versus where we should be thinking about innovation as shared prosperity and minimizing harm. So I love the approach that you shared. So I have two questions. One is about, what are some of the clear harms of big tech owning this? Like, for example, not paying the media house is definitely one of the. Are you seeing some other harms for having this space dominated by big tech, specifically in the African context? But also, what are some? The second one is about ethical principles. Like, as nations adopt these technologies, like what are some principles that they should be looking at and adopting to make sure these systems are not causing harms and just preventing biases? And so to
Yeah, I think we have very good ethics globally that have been set by UNESCO. For example, has a recommendation on ethical AI, transparency, issues of transparency, algorithmic auditing, So all those ethics are very important. However, I guess today, and because of the current times that we are in, I wanted to talk about one ethical point that is often not spoken much about. We talk about opting out. However, we don't really talk about autonomy. And we currently, I went to purchase a laptop a week ago, and I had a choice if I wanted to connect my laptop to the internet or not. However, the moment I connected it, all the AI apps popped up, and I didn't have much choice into which AI app, or even if I wanted AI. And we are just talking about generative AI. So what about AI within the health sector? Especially, for example, if we are in Namibia and we're to get a machine that is, for example, manufactured in India, it could be that it was manufactured to understand the anatomy of that environment. However, it might not pick up certain diseases, for example, that are in Southern Africa, that are immune to Southern Africa, for example. And those are the biggest dangers that we are having. AI is currently used, for example, the Zambian government is using AI in its tax revenue. We are using systems, and we want to quickly get on the hype and adapt to systems that we have not even audited or checked. And we are really pushing this AI and emerging tech narrative on a whole global 8 million billion, I mean 8 billion people, sorry, around the world, that we are saying that you need to be part of AI. The digital ID agenda, for example, why do we want to digitize the world so much when we have so many other social issues that we need to deal with? We have so many people talk about they don't see the impact of climate change. Last year, I was in Zambia, and because Zambia relies on hydroelectricity, we had load shedding that lasted for about 8 hours. There was no AI that could come to help resolve that. What AI was doing, it was data centers that were using a lot of power. I know that most data centers are trying to switch now to clean energy. However, there's still that argument still stands. So we are promoting a system that is not really bringing us much advantage, apart from it being a social and I can research my thing and it can be quick. I was talking to a friend and saying, no, for me, ChatGPT is like advanced Google. There's nothing really special about it. So why are we making such a big deal of this and forcing it on people without giving them choice? And I think that that's one thing that we need to start advocating for, is the choice to refuse any form of technology, to say that I do not want to partake in this technology, but refusal without any discrimination from social practices or from economic benefits, so that I can have the choice that I would not want to have a digital ID or a digital presence, and I can still have it be a citizen of a country and a global community without having my face scanned all over the world and my identity. For example, in African culture, in my culture, my name is very sacred. It's something that was given to me by my parents, that I have someone's name, I'm called someone's namesake, which is something that is very sacred within our cultures. So my name is now displayed all over, and we are trying to legalize and to advocate for governments to have things like digital IDs, digital currencies, and we are removing that respect of culture and that respect of autonomy. And I think that that's something that we need to really question ourselves. What are we pushing? And if we are pushing AI, who benefits from it? And are we really, 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 if we think about it, really benefiting from this thing called AI in terms of what we really need as basic needs for us as human beings? So yeah, I think that's really one important ethic. So autonomy and the right to refuse.
Couldn't agree more. That was so powerful, MC, truly. It the question really, the key question is why? And the next is who benefits? Of all the other social problems we could be solving, this notion that AI somehow we are being opted into this world of AI without giving choices. And you also said that another key piece, which is without discrimination. Because yes, we can opt out, but what are the consequences, right, of doing that? And it's becoming the burden is becoming heavier and heavier for folks to opt out. So I love all of the powerful points you made. Completely agree. We need to reclaim the space and reclaim and make sure that we are being like looking more at consent. I think somebody in the chat said, whatever happened to consent? It really feels like that autonomy in the sense of agency has been taken away from us, for sure, slowly but surely. I have a lot of questions for you, so I'll leave you with just one last question. Is where do you see or what do you see as the future of a responsible AI discourse, given the context of where and what's happening in the politics in the United States? And where do you see the space going, not just the United States, but also rest of the world? Because there is a rise of right-wing extremism across the world, and countries are getting more nationalistic. Would love your take on where are we headed?
I think I'm not the first to say what I'm about to say. We are at a point in our life, or at a moment in our lives, where we have a choice either to stand with the oppressor or against the oppressor. And unfortunately, the US have made it in such a way that we are all impacted. There's a lot of funding that was cut in Africa, including the work that I do myself. It was cut, and we can't continue to do the work that we are doing because of the current politics within the US. So it's very heartbreaking to see what is happening, because it's not a joke, the work that is being done by a lot of activists, advocates, and people who have done a lot of research, especially in the tech space, because we can see where this is heading to. And we can either play a role of being a face of responsible AI, or we can really play the role of standing up with people who are oppressed. Something that apartheid taught us is that when it first started, the colored community, which were sort of mixed race and Indian community, never really thought it would impact them that much, because it was against Black people. But slowly but surely it did. And someone who discriminate, they will find anything, even if it means finding a mole that is different from you. People will find anything to other somebody. So if it can happen to the most marginalized amongst you, it will most likely happen to you. And I think that is not something that is a threat. It's something that is historical. We have seen it. We have seen it play out over and over and over and over. And what is happening right now around the world is basically what my mom, and it's quite really sad because it's what my mother faced as a young child. She faced apartheid, right? So a lot of us African researchers, especially in the tech space, and if there are people who are not from the African continent, I would really ask you to check in with your African counterparts, the ones that you have been parading, that they are good. because a lot of organizations have been impacted and a lot of work is going to stop as a result of this. And that's exactly what the system is trying to do. The system is trying to stop the advocacy. It's trying to stop whoever is opposing what is currently whatever agenda they have moving forward. So it's really important for us to mobilize, to advocate, and to support each other. And the support does not only come with, oh, I hope, Emsie, that you're doing well. The support comes, it's financial support. It is support in terms of what Mia is doing, giving a voice to people, giving a space. So it's really support that we need right now. And I can tell you there is a reason why a lot of people look at the African continent when things are going hayway. There is a reason why we are at the center of a lot of discourse. And if this place that is considered the most marginalized is completely silent, chances are your voices will be silent as well. So tech space, women, allies come together, mobilize. Your resources are needed now more than ever in order to keep the work continuing.
To everybody, we are recording this and we will post it on replay for everyone who needs hope and inspiration. You are amazing. Thank you so much, MC, for saying that. Couldn't agree with you more. We are here. We are not going anywhere. Women in AI ethics has been around when even AI ethics wasn't popular. Nobody knew what an AI ethicist was. Nobody cared about ethics. And even now, we are going into another very challenging phase. And we are not going anywhere because we have amazing leaders like you in our community. We have women who are doing the hard work. And I completely agree. We need to show up for each other, support each other. So with that, I'd like to just close off this I'm so grateful that you came, you took the time to talk to us, inspire this group. We are so excited because we have each other and we know together we will make progress. We will continue to move forward. So thank you again for joining us. We will stop the recording and we go into Q&A, which won't be recorded.